TD Ryan Unleashed is brought to you by Scott Zimet, your State Farm Insurance agent in DeKalb. Call 815-748-3101 or stop by at 2587 Sycamore Road, Suite D in DeKalb. Like a good neighbor, Scott Zimet and State Farm are there. Pizza Villa, pizza, pasta, sandwiches, and more at 824 West Lincoln Highway in DeKalb. Don't forget Kids Eat for Free on Thursday. For delivery or pickup, go to pizzavilla.com or call 815-758-8116. Elder Care Services of DeKalb. Safe, secure, and supported, helping you stay in home where you want to be. Call 815-758-6550 or stop in at 1701 East Lincoln Highway in DeKalb or on the web at ecsdekalb.org. My Insurance Guy in Sycamore covers Medicare to auto care and everything in between. Stop by at 204 South Main Street in Sycamore. Call 815-899-0950 or online at myinsuranceguy.com. And welcome into TD Ryan podcast number 69. Honored and privileged to have with us the retiring Deputy Police Chief of DeKalb, Jason Leverton. Jason, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well.
I'm in awe to have you here again. Just so much thanks for you for all you've done for the community through the years. At any point in your career, in your over 30-year career, I could call you Officer Leverton, Corporal, Sergeant, Lieutenant, Police Commander, and then ultimately, when you retired here, Deputy Chief. Only person in DeKalb police history, if I'm correct, that do all that. Tell us about that.
Yes, and just kind of the way things worked out with our rank structure and the years that I was here, was able to fulfill all of those ranks, and again, somewhat just kind of by chance, but the only person to fill all those ranks, and really how that happened, obviously started as patrol officer, as most police officers do. And at the time, we had a corporal rank in the patrol division, and really that existed because there weren't enough sergeants to cover all the shifts. So instead of adding another sergeant rank at the time, they had a corporal rank, which would just fill in for the sergeants on shifts that they weren't there.
Okay.
So maybe like once a week, you were the officer in charge and so forth. So that was only in that role for about a year, and then became a sergeant, and really that patrol sergeant position is where I spent my longest amount of time, which is just over 11 years. But then, yes, was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, which was actually in our detective division. But then we changed roles, and I was promoted to a police commander position. And a few years after that, we eliminated the lieutenant position. So the corporal position, didn't last that much longer either after I was in it. So there was two ranks that I was in that no longer exist. And then was, of course, deputy chief after the commander role. So,
wow.
Again, there was a couple of other peers that I worked with that skipped one of those roles, for whatever reason, or just, wasn't ever promoted to one of them. So, yes, as it turned out, the only person in our history to say that I was in every one of those ranks.
Wow, that is awesome. It reminds me of a MASH episode where Radar's in there with Hawkeye drinking in a bar, and he's only supposed to be for officers only, and he calls him a corporal captain. He's a corporal captain, is what he is.
Yes, sir.
Well, when you were a young officer, did you aspire to work your way up through the ranks? Was there a goal? You ever hear of the Peter principle, where you keep working your way up to the point where you get a job you can't do? But was that your goal, to just keep working up like that?
I think it was. I think when you first start off, you're not thinking so much about the higher ranks, especially. You just want to get hired, you want to make it, you want to do well. But, really early in my career, I was always a person that wanted to know how everything worked. I wanted to know the why behind everything, and where all my paperwork went, and where even all the carbon copies of tickets went. I wanted to learn all that, and I think that helped me understand the bigger picture of police management, of police supervision, of just always being curious and wanting to know. And really, I think what goes into a lot of the other roles is you have to care. You have to be in those roles because you want to make a difference. You want to see the department advance and, things to improve. And,
Well, you helped design the new DeKalb Police Department, right? You were instrumental in doing that.
Yes. My background is actually in construction. My dad has owned a construction company in Northwest Illinois for 50 years now. So I grew up with a hammer in my hand and was familiar with blueprints and things like that. So when it came time to build the new PD, we all had input in it, which was great. There was a real cross section of the department that got to kind of voice their opinions and, what we felt as were things that we needed or shortcomings in our existing building.
Yeah, for instance, I found an article about the evidence room. It was fascinating how the evidence room used to be and the improvements. And you guys saw many different ways to improve that, especially when just getting out of the police car, unloading the evidence, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And again, we were so used to doing things with the physical conditions that we had, that it was just, that was second nature. We didn't think too much of it. But when we saw how much better it could be more efficient, more secure. And yes, I've always said our greatest areas of improvement was handling of evidence and also handling of prisoners. Even at the old PD, it was an office building. It wasn't designed for a police department. So there was a couple of like basic office rooms that became booking rooms, and they just weren't that secure. And we had issues, with officer safety and even prisoner safety at times, and just overall security. So there were huge improvements. And I think when we went to build the building, most of the community saw it as, okay, it's just a lot bigger. But what it became was a lot safer, a lot more efficient, and again, allowed for the growth that was already occurring in the old PD. Every closet got turned into an office, and the building. I think
you maxed that building out.
Absolutely. And just the infrastructure was terrible. We always joked that the building had two temperatures, too hot or too cold. And just to have a state-of-the-art building with all the technology and all the current, just accoutrements was fantastic.
We're talking with retiring deputy, DeKalb Police Chief Jason Leverton. Now, Jason, I found an article here where it says, after an encounter with a drunk driver during his teen years, Leverton decided to pursue a career as a police officer. Tell us about that.
Yes, as a senior in high school, well, like a lot of seniors in high school, I had a lot of ideas, but really not many plans. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. Obviously, I mentioned, my dad having a construction company. His dream was always to have all of his boys, work with him in construction.
Sure.
And I enjoyed doing that, and it was the satisfaction of seeing what you built and the, things that lasted for a long time. But
my favorite question on the radio was nature versus nurture. If your dad was doing that, and a lot of kids are doing what their dad did, would you be doing that? So you almost went into construction.
Yes, and I learned a lot of those things, and I still am always working on some projects of my own and for my church or for friends and so forth. I've not done it as a job, but I've just done it because I had those abilities. So, but I was very much a people person, and I didn't realize that so much at the time that, it became that I realized I needed to do something for, again, a community and for the betterment of people and so forth. So, but yes, as a senior in high school, I was actually hit on purpose by a drunk driver.
So you were hit? Okay.
I was hit. Yeah, I was actually standing outside my vehicle, and somebody pulled into the parking lot and started yelling and cussing and swearing and carrying on. And I didn't know him. I'd never seen him before. And all of a sudden, he makes a beeline right towards me with his truck and hits me with his truck and slams me into my own vehicle, and he takes off. And obviously, I was in shock. I didn't know why this happened or who this was or whatever. So I was with some friends there in the little town where I grew up, and nobody was familiar with this truck or who it was. And of course, we called the police, which back then was just the sheriff's department that covered a lot of these smaller communities out there, and two deputies came. And I remember giving a very vague description of kind of a beat-up pickup truck and kind of this long-haired country boy, which at the time would have probably described half the population of Stevenson County. But after I gave that description, one of the deputies says, I have an idea who this might be. And he gets in his car and he leaves. And 20 minutes later, he comes back, and there's this guy in the back seat of his squad car still yelling and cussing and spitting and carrying on. And he actually looks at me through the squad car window, goes, yeah, that's the guy. And I'm like, isn't this supposed to be the other way around? And it was the guy, and basically in his drunken stupor, he thought I was someone else. He thought I was someone that he had had a problem with or some issue, and I'd never seen him before, and he'd never seen me before. But again, in his drunken condition, he thought I was the guy, I guess. But so anyway, he ends up going to jail and all these things and having to go through the court process. But really,
but that wasn't in the manual. You're the officer that said, I might recognize this guy. It wasn't in the manual to go get him. Get the guy. Right?
Yes.
That's what I love with it.
But I was so impressed with that. Here I just give this general description, and they knew who it was. I'm thinking, boy, how did he know that? Like, how did he, and I'm thinking, like, that's what I want to do. Like, be there for people when they're having, a situation where it's, a total innocent victim situation, and having their worst day kind of thing, and being able to help. So and the other part about that was, at that time, Cops was brand new on television.
Okay.
And well, so was SportsCenter. So me and my high school friends, we'd spend all night, some of these weekend nights just
that's heaven right there.
SportsCenter, our Cops. But I remember watching those cop shows going, like, some of that stuff looks pretty cool. Like, I feel like I could do that. I could envision myself doing it. So I went to college, got a 4-year degree in criminal justice, and this was where I got
And then
hired.
ultimately you got your master's too, right?
I did, yes, sir. In like 2010 to 2013, I did my master's program in public administration here at NIU.
I just saw a special on Mr. Rogers too. At one point he says, "Look to the helpers." There, and then the quote from you here is, "That night it struck me that something I would like to do to be able to be there when people need the help the most." So I mean, you are the help. You were Mr. Rogers' helper.
Well, I
what
sure
greater
tried my
compliment
best.
did you get?
Yes, sir.
Now, your dad was at I got to see some of the retirement ceremony there at the Chief Bird. He does go on. I love David. He's just wonderful.
Yes, he's
But your dad was, I wrote down, giving you the business, like from the Leave It to Beaver days. But he was kind of giving you the business, talking about your work ethic. Tell about growing up in DeKalb. What was it like growing up in DeKalb?
Well, again, growing up out here in this area and farm country, and it's a work first mentality for so many families, and we had a big family. I have 7 brothers and a sister, and it was a big family, and we all had to pitch in. I was one of the older ones, so I always had to help with the younger ones, and it wasn't an ask to do things. It was an expectation. Like, this is just what you did. But I think it was good in so many ways, because it helped me realize the importance of getting things done and stepping in, even if you aren't asked to do something, to just step in and do it because you see that it needs done, and to do the right thing. And certainly thankful for strong, well-grounded parents that there was no question in our household what was right and what was wrong. No question. So just with those kinds of just kind of character and traits being just, again, expected of us. Again, it was tough sometimes as a young person, as a teenager. You kind of wanted to flex and do your own things, and but you knew like what was the right thing to do and the best thing to do. So
yeah, my grandmother always emphasized that the integrity is not what you do when people are watching, and integrity is what you do when people aren't watching.
Yes,
so you do the right thing even when they're not watching.
And my dad he's never been one to talk a lot on the phone or make a lot of phone calls, but when we would have some major incident here, a lot of times he would call, and sometimes I couldn't answer in that moment, but I would call him back, and he would just, I just first of all want to make sure you're safe, make sure things are fine. I would tell him what was going on. Okay, good. And he would always like end it with, "Okay, now get back to work."
Well, I was going to say that work ethic. I put that down here because that's a great thing to have, and obviously you and your siblings all had that as well.
Yes, I believe so.
Now, we said one sister. I had 4 brothers and 1 sister. So you had 6 brothers and 1 sister?
7 brothers and
7
1
brothers.
sister, and my sister came at the end. So can
Okay,
you
those are babies.
imagine having 8 big brothers?
Yeah, because she was the oldest. She had to watch 4 younger brothers. And
I see.
Don't get me started with
the
that.
opposite in our family. So we always joke that she didn't have a date till she was 30 years old.
And your dad said you got your smarts from your mom. Tell us about your mom.
Well, my mom is one of those people that when you don't know her so well, is just quiet, and just always but paying attention and observant and so forth. But she extremely intelligent. I mean, she was, in addition to having all of us, also taught school for a number of years and different grades and different subjects. But also witty, always clever with things, and something to say and something funny to say, and a little sarcasm if I have some sarcasm, which I do. That also comes from her. But no, I think I'm a good blend of both my parents.
We're a family of punsters ourselves, so you get a good pun in there, and don't be afraid to point it out to somebody if they don't get it.
Yes.
Now, when we were growing up, I used to have Officer Friendly came to our school. I went to Queen of All Saints in Chicago, and Officer Friendly was great. He would come and. We just were in awe of him then. Did you have an officer that came by your school then?
We really didn't. Just again, kind of growing up in a small town, didn't have that direct relationship, other than just the police chief in our town was somebody that everyone knew. So even though we didn't directly play that part, that is who he was. Was again, he knew all the families. Basically knew all the kids in town, and even if he caught you acting up or running a stop sign, he would just chew you out, and he would just tell you, like he told me, now, all right, I could write you a ticket, I'm not going to, but you need to go home and tell your dad. And when I see him tomorrow at the coffee shop, I'm going to ask him if you have told him the story.
I love that.
And you better have, otherwise then I'll tell him, and then you'll be in trouble from both of us. Yes, sir. So even though it wasn't so structured like in a school environment, we definitely had that.
That's great, too. And I want to mention the dogs, because I just lost my dog last week. I'm going to get all emotional, because at 16 years, we had our beautiful Lily. But you did a tribute to Drax, the police dog. Tell us about that. Why did you do that? What was that about?
Well, again, police K-9s are obviously very special to us in many ways, because they are, that handlers, of course, just lifetime partner for as long as one or the other is in the business. But they, become, eyes and ears for all of us. Again, just regarded as a police officer and as, a dog, like a special dog that is always there at the station. So obviously the unfortunate and untimely passing of Drax was really kind of hit all of us. I mean, we've had dogs that we've had to retire and just, have gotten a little bit old or,
Right.
Just kind of lose their skills, but to, have a, short illness and to pass away in that way. And, we had one of those husky statue dogs outside the PD, and it was actually at the old PD, and it was, you might remember it, but half of it, that one half was a police dog, and the other half was a fire dog, and I don't know why they did it like that, but it had really deteriorated, and parts were falling off of it. So we did a project where we actually involved high school, where we got it, kind of redone or repainted. And then even after it was repainted, we got the idea of like, we could have or should have made it try to look as much like Drax as possible. So we made a few little alterations to it, and then just did that as a tribute for him. So again, it's a police dog in general, that's just now kind of on a pedestal inside the officer's entrance at the PD, and of course there's a plaque there for Drax. So we just thought it would be a good way to just, again, honor police dogs in general, but specifically Drax.
We had a book, Dogs of 9/11, where they were the dogs that had to go and it's really sad because the dogs were usually used to find living people, and they had to use them to find cadavers. And they talked about how the dogs, every once in a while, a fireman would hide just so the dog could find a live person and get the toy and get the treat. And but they talked about the catharsis and there's 2 or 3 pictures where a fireman is holding the dog, hugging the dog, and they said that they would tell the dog all their problems. They just lost their buddies, and the dog act is such a wonderful sense. And I'm sure at the police station it was the same way that Drax had that effect on the officers when they came back and went through something dramatic, and could just hug Drax and just kind of calm down a little bit.
Sure. I mean, so many people can make that connection with dogs and maybe just animals in general. And, we've had situations where we've brought, dogs that are trained as comfort dogs as well. So, and not just for us, but, for victims of crime and, their families and a school incident and those kinds of things. So, yeah, whether it's our own K-9 or our area, some police departments, but also just some agencies that have these comfort dogs, it's such a great help. And they're starting to see them more and more. There's schools that have dogs that are there all the time, and other police departments that have dogs there all the time. Again, it's really not so much for the officers. It's there for them too.
Right.
And it's, it's great, but also, for the public and for victims.
Yeah, and especially with the kids, like you said. I know our folks at CASA, we talked to them about how they utilize dogs with the kids. I want to read this. This is from the Illinois Association of Chief of Police. Deputy Chief Leverton retired on Friday after over 30 years in law enforcement, having started with the department in 1996. Chief Leverton has been an instrumental member of the department and has retained devoted to the DeKalb community. His integrity and compassion are unmatched, and he was a mentor to many of our officers. Congratulations on your retirement, Deputy Chief Leverton. You will be greatly missed. And then again, that's from the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. I always love that plural, the Chiefs of Police. But what does that mean when you get a little statement like that, to see something like that?
I mean, first of all, I'm just grateful, and just thrilled to have a long and safe and successful career. And the IACP is an organization that I've been involved with. They do a lot of behind the scenes type of work, for police departments, for chiefs' offices, things like policy preparation and protocol development, things like that. So, in my role, especially as deputy chief, but even as commander, and even before that, was involved with, some of those things that are behind the scenes that really kind of make the department what they are. So, again, there's a number of chiefs from, the area and around the state that I've had the opportunity to work with and to, work on some of these projects. But, again, to see a statement like that, I'm just grateful more than anything. And, you do this job not for the accolades or, to get this recognition. You do it because it's the right thing to do. But it is also, it's nice to know that people have noticed that, okay, he's been here a long time, has always tried to do things the right way.
Brenda says, congratulations, Jason. Hope you plan on bowling next year. Are you still bowling?
Yes, I definitely plan on bowling. Now, I bowl not because I'm good. I bowl because it's fun, and it's kind of an outlet and so forth. But yeah, that's always been fun to do a bowling league here in town.
Missy Garman, a big friend of the WLBK, and of course, Freezing for Food, her mom, which is wonderful. Congratulations to one of the best. You'll be missed. But maybe we'll get to see some more fabulous photos. Does that mean photo? Are you a photo taker?
I'm an amateur photographer. I love to go out and take photos. That I've always have been, but I will say maybe 15 years ago, I really started to kind of take photos on purpose, if that makes sense, instead of just like stumbling across something or taking photos on family vacations or whatnot, of really trying to seek out, photogenic places. And I had a friend here, unfortunately passed away from cancer a few years ago, but he was a prolific sunset photographer. And I always enjoyed sunsets a lot. But I had never really thought too much about really seeking them out and getting to a good place with some, a farm and as a silhouette in the foreground and things. And he knew so many places around DeKalb County and would take me around and be like, well, here's where you got to be at this time of year and at that time of year. And so I really started doing that a lot more. And I love the outdoors and love the national parks all around the country and even state parks and so forth. So I go to all those places and, I'm not a good people photographer, okay, but I'm a fairly good, I guess, landscape photographer, sunset photographer. So I do enjoy those things a lot. And again, I appreciate that comment, because one thing, I view photography as, I put photos on Facebook and people see them, and people have said like, well, that's inspired me to go out and, see a sunset or a waterfall. And I'm like, when you have inspired someone, I feel like you've really accomplished something, because now you're, really kind of engaging them in some action or some experience that maybe they wouldn't do. So I like that aspect of it. And now the other thing that I do joke about is people say, well, Jason, you take such great photos, these beautiful photos. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't show you the bad ones. I don't post the ones that don't turn out.
I'm reading a book right now where the guy is an artist, and he paints the same sunset from the same place every day. He's been doing it for 20 or 30 years, and he says no two pictures are the same.
That is absolutely true, yes. And I think, a photographer, whether amateur like myself or professional, you feel like you never take the perfect photo. You feel like there's always something that could have been a little bit better, you could have done a little bit better, but that is certainly true. Is like no two photos are the same. And, my hobby primarily is railroads and trains and so forth, which is something I've had ever since I was.
Did he get big boy when he was in town?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I'll be getting it some more. But
now, what was the shot there you were going for? Was it the head on? And we apologize for that technical problem. Jason was telling us about his photogenic capabilities. We're talking about the big boy train that came through DeKalb, and I was asking the best shot, the best angle for that. You said you wanted to stand back a little bit.
Yeah, you want to be back a little bit farther. Now, a couple of years ago when it went through, I took a photo as it went under the coaling tower that was just here on the east side of town. But
I know.
That got torn down.
Which I think I saw a picture that you took of that.
Yes, there was a photo that the city used on the website for a while. But what I did for this last one is I had mentioned my friend who passed away from cancer, but his favorite railroad crossing in DeKalb County was out at Willrett Road on the west side of the county out by Malta. So I decided to do it there. It's more open, but the train kind of comes down a bit of a hill and then starts back up. And again, you've kind of got, farmscape in the background. So that's where I did it locally this time. But usually I will try to find some historic structure like a depot. And thankfully our depot still stands here, not in great shape, but it's still here. Things, like that, a depot, a coaling tower, grain bins, things.
But it's one of those cameras where you hold it down and take multiple shots, or you get for one or two really good shots?
I use a DSLR, digital camera. So I just manually take a number of sequence shots.
Okay.
And then again, I will try to, use or post the one to me that it's kind of just right,
Right.
So.
That's the hard part. I know, going through all those photos. And then finally, I think Tamara says it best here, when she says, thank you for your friendships, guidance, and years of service, Jason. Congratulations on your retirement. So again, to hear that, to know how many lives that you affected, and like you said, guiding them on a path that they might not have taken, that's got to mean a lot to you.
It really does. And I think it's because this job in policing, it's about people. People say, well, it's law enforcement. Well, no, that's one of the jobs of a police officer. It's working with people, working for people, trying to get them to a better place. Yes, sometimes, there are arrests, and it's law enforcement, and it's putting people in jail that need to be in jail, and having repercussions for actions that have hurt someone else or have harmed someone else and so forth. So that's certainly part of it, but you have to have good people skills. Again, if you look at any successful police officer, I can show you a police officer who has good people skills.
I want to read this part. Leverton continue. This is a report that was made in 2025. Emphasizing the need to prevent high levels of domestic violence happening around DeKalb. And I know Chief Byrd was just here on with us and saying that is the number one call, our domestic violence calls. And I have this article from 2021, DeKalb Police Department Social Worker Program helps nearly 300 people. Now, this is when it just began in 2020. I know we've talked to our friends at the DeKalb County Mental Health Board about how important it is. Tell us about this, Jason, where the social worker will go out with the officers, right? And if it's not a bad situation, they can leave them with the social worker
Yes.
and do more police work, right?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned both of those things, because both of those, domestic violence victims and then people, dealing with behavioral health issues and mental challenges it's complicated for a police response, let alone a community response. But again, the embedded social worker program, I have said that this is one of the best things we've ever done. And this started, the background work started in 2017, where the DeKalb County Community Mental Health Board came. Chief Lowry at the time and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this partnership of, the police department could get a grant through Department of Justice to study the areas where and how people are falling through the cracks, the people that need services and need assistance, and yet it's this cycle. And some of these people, unfortunately, get to the point where they're getting arrested for things, but jail isn't the answer, and fines aren't the answer. They need some help. They need some behavioral health guidance and some mental health assistance and so forth. So so I got very much involved with that, and we were a recipient of that grant, which again something I feel like the department should be very proud of, because we were actually the second smallest police department in the country that got that grant, because most of them were big cities that were getting these grants.
I've learned there's an art to grant writing.
Yeah,
I talked to our friends from Elder Care Services and the Family Service Agency, and you got to write a grant in such a way.
Absolutely, and it's something I learned over the years.
But look at how well this program has worked out.
It's reached so many people. It's helped so many families. It continues to grow. We started with just one part-time social worker in 2020. Now we have 3 that work just about full-time, trying to get them on different shifts around the clock. I'm sure Chief Bird has talked about that. But yeah, it's such a tremendous impact. It helps everyone. It helps those people, but it also helps police officers of standing there going like, I don't really know what to do here. I don't really know the best thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's people, they just want to talk and talk and talk. Well, you don't have an hour to talk. Your next call is already on hold waiting for you, after 15 minutes or maybe by the time you even arrived at that call, there's other calls waiting. So, officers, so many of them, they want to spend that extra time, but you don't have that extra time. So to have the social workers be able to step in and go, okay, this is, not a situation that we need, police here for.
Right.
And, we can try to really get to the, root of what they need and what they're lacking and, try to connect them to services. So again, I'm sure you've seen, a lot of the community has seen the statistics, but they are so good, so effective at, talking through a situation, a problem, a crisis, but then kind of boiling it down to what does this person need, and then connecting them to the appropriate service.
Right, very good, too. And when we did our suicide prevention show, we learned about death by a cop, where somebody has mental issues, and they literally want you to come and shoot them. How are you guys supposed to be dealing with stuff like that? And unfortunately, we lose many police officers to suicide, and I know when we talk about attempting the act and committing, unfortunately, the male police officer's number one completion of the act, because they're familiar with firearms and they know how to take their own lives. And it's just a terrible thing. And how have you dealt with that? And tell us about how you've dealt with that personally, Jason. With that.
Well, I think the job of a police officer, most people would regard like, okay, that's a tough job. That that must be hard. But I think a lot of times they think about the physical aspects of it. The shift work and working all night and working long hours, and you work all night and then you're up half the day going to court or doing other things and being with your family, the physical strain, but it's the mental and emotional drain that's far worse. It's harder on you. It's the cumulative stress. It's seeing all the violence. It's seeing how terrible people can be to each other, and seeing the innocent victims, victimized over and over. And
Chief Bird described it as little razor cuts.
Yes, yeah, and sometimes it's like that. And I know we've also used the analogy of when you start off your career, you've got this empty backpack, but every bad call is like another pebble, another little stone going into your backpack, and you can handle it for a while, but then it starts to get heavy, it starts to get full, and some of those stones are bigger than others. Some of those calls are harder on you for whatever reason, and sometimes we see police officers that they've reached their limit.
Right.
And sometimes you see, the bad videos of police officer acting badly or acting inappropriately, unprofessionally, and be like, oh, what happened to them? They just snapped. Like, that was a call they've done 100 times. They shouldn't have snapped. I'm like, well, it wasn't that one.
Right.
It was just that cumulative stress finally became too much. So I think what's
the bag
important.
was full. Boy, that's a great
bag was
analogy.
full, yeah.
Wow.
And there has to be some things, that we've talked about internally, that you've got to empty that bag out sometimes. And it's using your vacation time. And even with that, sometimes, and I've been guilty of this, especially growing up in construction, is I used my vacation time to, do my house roof or, work on some project, and it's still not really a break. So we sometimes also remind, like the root word of a vacation is vacate, like leave. Like you need to have that time away.
Right.
And again, we care about the community and we want to be here, but you have to get away sometimes, and and you have to get away from it. So I think for police officers having whatever it is, again, I mentioned a couple of mine already with hobbies, being outdoorsy and liking to do things outdoors, whether it's, fishing or kayaking or hiking, photography, just being out there and doing things, my railroad hobby with trains and everything. And some people might look at that, well, that's kind of different. That's kind of weird, or whatever. I'm like, but it works for me.
Yeah,
It
whatever
helps
works,
me
right?
empty
Yeah.
my bag out, that I can get to my happy place, so to speak, in some of those ways. So, I think that's important, and it's gotten better as far as the recognition of that cumulative stress in law enforcement, and again, trying to have a structure where you can take those vacation time days
Right.
that you've earned and use them appropriately. And I will say, like when I first started in my career, drinking was much more prevalent. Like it was kind of the expectation that a couple of nights a week you went out, and you drank. And now it's not like that, which is great. It's so much more healthy. And again, it was some improvements just, in that way of having good habits as opposed to bad habits.
And how about your family? Because, again, not to refer to Chief Bird so often, but he refers to the fact that when you marry a police officer, the whole family marries a police officer.
That's
And,
true. That's true.
How has that been with you guys and your family?
It worked really well. Again, I mean, I tried on my part to not bring work home with me, and not get too in depth into personal stories or how things affected me and so forth. But you have to have that support, from your family, and kids are great because they're interested and curious about, police. Being a police officer, and they're proud of you. That your dad's a police officer, your mom's a police officer, or whatever the case may be. But then they see like the downside of it too. Your phone's always ringing, and they see the stress as they get
Right.
a little bit older. But to be able to explain, well, here's what's going on, and here's why, Here's why sometimes in the store we turn around and go the other way, and So, but yeah, you have to have that support from family, and and I feel like my extended family, even though my parents and my brothers and sisters are all in different places, around, but to know, when there was something tough that was going on, to get a message from them like, oh, I saw this happen, hope everybody's okay, hope you're doing okay, give me a call if you need something, just little things like that to know that people care.
No,
It's
did
just
you say your
important.
wife is a police officer?
No,
as
no,
well?
she's not. I'm just
Okay, I'm
meaning
sorry.
no, just in general. I think kids are always proud of the fact when their parent is a police
But
officer.
were you with her then, or you became an officer before you met her? Was that,
I started here. It was the
92,
same
right?
year, 96.
96.
I actually started here and then got married later that year.
okay, so she knew you were an officer.
Oh, yes.
She knew what
yes,
she was getting going
yes,
in there.
Yeah, and we actually met in college, so she knew I was, going, into this field.
Okay.
So,
And
but no, I mean, it was, there was always the support for that.
And the acorn falling from the tree, do you have any acorns going into the police field?
No, not so much. No, my middle son was very interested, but then I think they see that it's hard,
Yeah.
and not that it just takes a lot of effort, but that it's hard on you,
And the people around you, yes.
Now, I had an uncle that was a police officer, and now he's passed away a number of years ago now, but he was a police officer in Freeport and then became the police chief in the little town of Polo out there. So I had him as kind of a mentor, and but again, he told me the good, bad, and ugly.
Oh, yeah.
about
Okay, so
policing.
he didn't try to
wasn't-
talk you out of it, but
No.
he didn't.
But he's like, hey, it's going to be hard. There's going to be tough situations you're in. You're going to encounter someone that like personally, and they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And you just have to be like, look, I know who you are. I know your family, but I have to do my job here. So
There's a local Al-Anon group here, and the nice gentleman was in talking with us, and he said he was from, I think it was Sandwich, but his uncle arrested him. So his uncle arrested him for a DUI, and then he got taken to the hospital, and his mom was the nurse there at the emergency room. So don't mess up in a small town.
no,
right? It's like-
that's certainly true.
Now, I want to talk about some incidents here. Unfortunately, now the shooting on the campus of NIU, obviously you were here for that, and
Yes.
we could spend a whole show on that. It just was such a tragic time, but yet so many people stepped up. It was just incredible. When they talk about the heroes that run towards the fire, as opposed to people running away. And where were you that day? Were you there on campus that day? Were you?
I was actually off that day, but since I live right here in town and just a phone call away and was always willing to come in, I got a phone call probably within the first minute of it occurring. So I went in, but really didn't know what it was. I had gotten a rather frantic call of like, hey, there was a shooting and we need you to come in. Okay. It's not the time to ask a lot of questions. I just went in. But when I arrived all the squad cars are gone, like all of them. And I'm thinking, oh, this must be kind of big. Like all the cars are already gone. So, I go in, get changed, go into dispatch, and I could just tell from the look in their face, that it must be something really bad. And I'm like, well, what happened? They're like, well, there was a shooting at NIU. I'm like, well, what kind of shooting? Well, some guy just opened fire in the classroom. And I'm like, what that kind of shooting? Like, it was really, in a way, the farthest thing from my mind.
Right.
Because arriving, I was thinking, like, what other, what gang incidents we dealt with, what people were, I'm thinking, okay, what might this be? And did not cross my mind. So yeah, I mean, for us, obviously, as a community, as a university, is what I always have called it was our worst day, our darkest day, and really, especially then, that was the beginning of this unfortunate chain of school shootings. I mean, Virginia Tech had happened, I think, the year before, if I'm not mistaken. That was really kind of the first one, at least in modern times, and then was us, and then it was obviously just incredibly tragic. And I responded out there, probably within a half hour of it occurring. And again, there's so much chaos, that.
Well, what did the
you
hierarchy
really
look like?
know.
Because, obviously it became so big so quickly. We heard, the state police, and all of a sudden the federal marshals were there, and then the FBI was there. I mean, so in a very short period of time. So does one hierarchy take over the next one in terms of calling the shots?
Not so much. I mean, the local departments still generally run the scene, call the shots, but then when it becomes we need specialized people to do this or to do that, so obviously, we have a shooter, we have, a number of students, that have been shot, some that were killed, but we need to find out more about the shooter. We need basically a whole task force of people to be like, what's up with this guy? Why did he do this? Where is he from? What was his reasoning? What was the motive? What else might there be out there? Then there's the crime scene to process, which, state police have a good, crime scene, processing unit. We do too, but those people are already all busy.
Right.
So really it just becomes the extra help in the areas where they have expertise, So again, reaching back, into databases, FBI can, reach into so much more as far as trying to find the background of a person, especially back then where the technology wasn't nearly as connected as it is now. So you just need that many more people. You've already exhausted your whole department, and again, you just need that expert, specialized people to come in and help you with certain things. But I mean, really, by and large, it's still a local effort. That really decides what to do and who's going to do what, and then kind of the order of what needs to be done.
That's a great answer, boy. I tell you, and again, God bless you guys for getting through that, but a terrible time. And then another thing that I have to bring up, this was more recent, October 23rd, 2024. 911 call came in from Brian Bemis Toyota dealership about a patron that had become upset and was brandishing a knife. The individuals then attacked employees, with one employee receiving a stab wound in the extremity. Police arrived within 5 minutes and confronted the individual, refused to drop the knife, and instead advanced on the police, then shot the individual, neutralizing the individual and ending the attack. The employee was stabbed, was treated for a non-life-threatening at the local hospital. A standard protocol of an officer-involved shooting. The Illinois State Police will be conducting independent investigation. So it sounds like you guys did everything by the book, everything just right there. But what a scary situation where this guy has already stabbed one person, right? Mm-hmm. And if they come after you, you certainly would have the right to go shoot him at that point.
Right. And again, we see that escalated violence, occurring with more and more frequency, not just locally. I just mean everywhere. As far as people resorting to extreme violence first,
right.
They have a situation, and again, the person had some, I think some behavioral health issues going on there and so forth, but had been there for quite some time before suddenly, getting this knife out and then trying to attack everybody, and then ultimately the officers that responded. So, I think that just goes back to officer training, though, and even relating that, for example, even back to 2008 to the NIU shooting. We had trained for those things. We've prepared for those things. But I will say, in total honesty, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, it's probably never going to happen here.
Right.
I want to be ready. I want to know what to do. I don't want to be in the dark, when this type of thing may happen. But you still kind of have this expectation that, well, maybe it's not going to happen here. But that has changed. Now it will happen here. These types of things, whether it's a single, individual that's, brandishing a knife or weapon, maybe multiple individuals, bank robberies. And we've had all those things happen here. And again, it doesn't happen with a lot of frequency,
right? But
it happens once in a while. So, and I will say I'm very proud of our department for being very progressive over the years of training officers, really in every aspect that they need in order to be ready for these things, and having special units that have special training, whether it be, rapid response or weapons training and rescue training, and even the emergency medical side. We do a lot more than ever, as far as doing emergency first aid. With
Right. I
people.
can't believe how much training you guys have to have. Now, we just had an incident right here. We're recording this at the DeKalb Library. Just happened last week. A gentleman attacking somebody here and then physically attacking two women there at the farmer's market. And of course, first thing I read, big macho male, is that, boy, if I would have seen this happen, I would have jumped in. I would like to think that I would have stepped in there. But what are your thoughts about that when we got a scenario like that? Should somebody step in? We don't know. Well, obviously, at one point, the guy taking all his clothes off, so we know he's not armed at that point. But should we step in? Is it foolish to do that?
I do recognize the wanting to be careful and not wanting to interject into something where you might get hurt or seriously hurt or even killed. I do understand that. But I will say very emphatically, people need to fight back more. Yeah, especially if they're the ones being
all
victim.
3 women fought back.
Yeah, need to fight back, and people need to come to their aid. And I think the same thing, even if I weren't a police officer, I see some of these videos. Now, this one, of course, was locally and happened right here, but I see on social media some of these videos. I'm like, I would have laid that guy out if I was there. But again, I do have some specialized training and was familiar with that. But even so, yes, I very much believe people, they shouldn't be afraid to fight back. Obviously, if they're the ones, directly under attack or whatever the case may be. But absolutely, bystanders need to step in more. Those videos need to surface more of people getting immediate repercussions for their actions.
Yes.
And then maybe it would happen less.
That's refreshing to hear that. We're talking to Jason Leverton, who's stepping down as the deputy chief of DeKalb Police. You've done so many things through the years. As a sergeant, you helped with the revision of the field training program. You completed a Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command, where you served as class vice president. You supervised the investigation division, initiated the target response unit. What is that, Jason?
The target response unit, most places would refer it to as like their street crimes unit. So that's a unit, even though it's changed names a little bit over the years. Now we call it Advanced Criminal Enforcement Team. But it's mostly focusing on gang, drug, and weapons offenses. And then really kind of whatever the hot topics are on the street, whether it's a string of vehicle burglaries or commercial burglaries. So it's kind of what's going on right now.
Okay, we've seen that, like catalytic converters are being taken
away. Yes, okay. And that's a good example. So even though it's not quite a high level as a crime, perhaps as a drug crime or weapons crime, but it's happening a lot, and a lot of people are being affected and victimized, and out a lot of money for these things. So we will devote some people to that. So yes, that was early, I think, in my stint as a lieutenant, where we first came up with that idea, and it was, somewhat replicated, from other departments, and seeing, well, how do you guys do this? Deal with your street crime unit. So yeah, we called it the targeted response unit because again, it was like targeted toward a certain type of offense that was occurring out in the street at the time. But again, primarily, yes, the gang drugs.
Well, using that as an example seemed to work because the people stopped stealing the catalytic converters.
Yes, I mean they've had so much success in so many areas, and again, things like drugs and weapons offenses are always out there, but there are people that you will never see again because they have been incarcerated because they had a whole career of trafficking drugs and weapons and so forth, and for a small unit, they've made such a tremendous impact and made so many high-level arrests. And many of these you really don't even see so much, as a media story because we're then right on to the next person.
Right, yeah.
And you don't want to spill the beans on one, at the risk of, having the integrity of a case being lost for another offender.
Now, the 911, I know we had to go down. I have no sense of time, but it wasn't too long ago. It was only a brief period where it went down and people were freaking out. But we take it for granted, don't you? But you promoted were promoted again in 2013, where you managed the 911 Communications Center and helped initiate programs such as the Community Relations, Crime-Free Housing, State Accreditation, and Embedding Social Worker Program. We talked about that. Mm-hmm. But talk about the community relations and the crime-free housing.
So yes, at the time,
that was bad, right? We had some bad
right. Yeah, that was another kind of right program at the right time because we were dealing with really a lot of large apartment complexes that they had started to see a decline in tenants that were NIU students, but they needed to fill those rooms, fill those and started, the kind of lowering the standards and kind of skipping out on doing background checks. And I get it as a business and,
sure.
You've got to recoup your costs and there's a lot of overhead involved and so forth. But what we saw was a lot of lawlessness occurring in some of these apartment complexes, and we saw, speaking of gangs, like even entire, gang members be like, okay, well, you know what, there's a lot of open spots here. We can all go in here and basically take over this place, and that's kind of what was happening. So, so that was
I
another
lived in Chicago. I
program
remember
that
the
we looked
Cabrini
at.
Greens where they would just pretty much take over the whole building.
Yes,
That was it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And on a smaller scale, we had started to see that. So, we looked at the crime-free housing program that had already existed in other cities, and again, usually larger cities, and we kind of tailored it to ourselves. So, we ran that entirely from the police department for several years, and of course, they moved it back to City Hall, which is fine. It probably better suited, of not having so much police involvement, but again, just having that component to it. So that was definitely a big improvement. And with community relations, again, our department has always been very community oriented, and the most so under Chief Bird. I
Wait,
will say. Chief
the
Bird
fun
is
jam in the park.
fantastic.
I was just going to
Yes.
bring up the fun jam in the
Yes,
park.
I mean, just another great successful program. But even back then, for the first time, we had a person that's really all they did was the liaison to all our community groups and other social service agencies, other public service agencies would attend their meetings and their events and board meetings and so forth, just so we were aware of everything they were doing, so we could kind of fill in the gaps and show police presence at these
Right.
things and participation. So, and that's just grown and grown. So
Yeah, it really is. I'm old as dirt myself, so I remember a movie called Disorderly Orderly with Jerry Lewis. But basically, he was a delinquent, as they called him, juvenile delinquent back then. But he befriends a cop in the movie, and the cop, he kind of takes him under his wing, and he ends up being a cop. Jerry ends up being a cop himself. But it was great because I know, made up Hollywood stuff, but it was really just really hit me home when I was a kid, the singing, he was in trouble, he was lost, and this officer came along and got him.
right. And again, you never know, like, in what type of call or what type of community event that, you might cross paths with someone, whether, child, adult, grandparent, whatever the case may be, and make some kind of impact, and point them in the right direction. And I think you mentioned that earlier about, like, the ability to help people. I mean, I had people that have had people that come up like, hey, are you, and sometimes they would refer to me to the rank I was at the time, which is fine. Are you Sergeant Leverton? Well, yeah. Well, you know what? Like, remember, you really helped me with my domestic situation. Like, my boyfriend was getting increasingly abusive, and you took some time and talked about the cycle of violence and told me, like, the way he's going, he's going to kill you, and you need to make yourself safe. And so I just didn't believe it at the time, but then I came to the point where I did, and I separated myself from him. And my life is so much better because it was just like
Wow.
you said, it was going down the wrong road. And that's a conversation I had 100 times with people. And it gets to the point on this side of it where it's kind of just another day or just another call, but again, that's an individual, that is living their life, and that's all they know. So, for police officers to make that kind of impact, and again, that's why we really try to emphasize with our officers is when you can take that extra time, show them that you care, show them the way out, not just this is what's happening with your case, but here's how to avoid this in entirety in the future. Maybe you need to stop drinking so much or stop using or stop being around these people, and get yourself to a better place.
Well, that's why I think the school resource officer is such a great program because, again, not only keeping an eye on things at the school, but the relationships they develop with the kids. And,
Yes.
how many kids have that turned, from what they might have done when they got out of high school? It's just-
And I know there's people out there that, maybe see more the negative side or really probably just don't understand what school resource officers do. And I get the sentiment of, like, do we really want or need police officers in these schools? I'm telling you, these kids don't see them as police officers. Yes,
No.
they're wearing the
All I
uniform.
do, I do the basketball games for the radio
Sure.
station I did, and all you have to see is the love and the camaraderie with the
Absolutely.
kids. It's just
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, it means so much to them. And again, I think it's important, even more than ever, that as a young person, you see a police officer as a person, not just wearing the uniform representing law enforcement and representing authority and so on. It just, this is an adult who cares about me, and is trying to make things better, in school and safer for us in school. And they're fun and they're funny and we love to be around them because I think people forget sometimes we're just regular people too.
Oh, yeah.
And we're parents and we're involved in the community and we're just trying to do our part.
Just go to the firemen versus police basketball game, right?
Absolutely.
Find out how human you guys are. And before we let you go, again, we're quickly out of time, but I know you designed so many things. We talked about the 911 system.
Yes.
You one of the last things you did here was report about the year 2025, highlighted 2025 accomplishments. Engagement of 531 community events. So you're talking about the 513, rather, community events. Telecommunications, 17,677 911 calls. 5 school resource officers promoting security and educating students. Social workers completed 1,695 social work services deliveries to residents. Patrol officers responded to 44,000 calls.
Yes.
I think we have to stop for a moment right there. 44,000 calls, actually 44,027 to be exact. Investigative Division assigned 451 cases, 6,380 hours of training by sworn officers, 852 hours of training by civilian employees. So we talked about the fact that you guys are always training, right? You don't just rest on your laurels.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I will say, just kind of mentioning, as you did, with our 911 center and the number of 911 calls and probably the last 15 years of my career, I was very much involved with our communications center and with the telecommunicators that are taking those calls. And those are amazing people.
Oh, God bless them.
That take those calls and, really listen to those callers and, send them the appropriate help. And, one thing I've done, which is borrowed from, another police officer in the past, that, to try to just remind people, like when you're just out and about and you hear a siren, see a police car, see a fire truck, see an ambulance, is say to yourself, a dispatcher made that happen. Because again, you see the fire truck, it's the fireman, you see the police officers, but there's people behind the scenes that have organized and orchestrated all that.
Right.
And again, the amount of training and the skills that they have to juggle so many things and take so many calls, as you mentioned, some of those numbers, and then also just keep it doesn't just end when they hang up the phone. That's just still when it's beginning. They still got to follow up and maintain, that service record with every one of those fire calls and EMS calls and police calls. So now we have throughout the county amazing telecommunicators, and they're often kind of forgotten.
They are unsung,
sitting behind the scenes in a room that doesn't really see the light of day, let alone the public. But again, they're such great, skilled people who also care about the safety of the first responders and the public. So we have just a great staff, and the 911 coordinator for the county, Heather Butler, again, a person that much of the public may not see, even though she is involved in a lot of community events, but behind the scenes making sure the technology is all working and that we're all up to speed with everything that we need. And I will say, in my career, the area that I learned the most mid-career was in 911.
Okay.
I thought I understood how it worked until I became a supervisor in that realm, an administrator, realized I didn't know anything about how it worked. It's so complicated. There's so many things behind the scenes.
And you mentioned Heather, didn't she do it for 40 years? I just see an article.
Well, Glenna
okay.
Glenna Johnson is the one that retired from the position that did
okay.
it for a long time. Heather came to us from Ogle County, had some experience there as a telecommunicator, 911 supervisor, and then now works technically in the county capacity, but works closely with the sheriff's office and with our police department.
Amazing people. I saw one where a lady got a call and it was her daughter who was involved in the accident. She had to stay with the line and get the officers there instead of running, to see her daughter. Just amazing stuff. We don't have time to get into this, but I wanted to talk to you about evidence here. And we were talking about you helping to redesign the new police department in DeKalb. It said anyone with a building key could get into our space, which wasn't an ideal. We have no dedicated area for evidence intake or processing. So that's what you were dealing with, right, back in the day before. But I always wonder about that. I see these bins here because we watch a lot of cop shows, the 48 hours and stuff, and they go back a 30-year-old case and there's an old, one of those bank boxes there.
Right.
But that's really what it is, right? I mean, you can't, now I can see you have a lot more like refrigeration and things,
Sure.
right?
So, I think the biggest difference and biggest improvement in individual evidence is everything's barcoded. So instead of just relying on really like a 3x5 card system, and you used really a similar numbering system, but it was all by hand. And it was kind of relying on everyone just being personally accurate and documenting things and filing it. So now it's all barcoded. So even though there might be a number of different pieces of evidence that go into one of those bins, every single one of them has their unique barcode. And then the bin has a barcode to where you can just scan the barcode of the bin and see the list of everything that's in it. Whereas before you would you would just get close enough and have to go find it, whereas now it's very specific. And then when we do our internal audits and our audits for accreditation, it has to be accurate. It has to be there. And again, it's easier to do it this way. Still takes a level of oversight, of course, and kind of that human touch of making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. But it's so much more efficient. It gives you the reminders of things that can be purged and things that, statute of limitations are up, or to check with the state's attorney to see if a case is done. So it's reminding you of, keeping it more current as well.
Just give me a 2-minute answer here, because again, you've been so wonderful with your answers here. But Jim Rhodes, I want to mention him before you go. Again, you've here your 30 years on the department, but he was 53 years, and of course he was involved with the evidence department. We just talked about that. But Can you say about a guy like that, Jim, dedicating his life to the DeKalb Police Department?
Yes, I mean, just a remarkable individual, and just a pillar in the community in many ways. But to a person, really any of us, just really inspiring to see someone that, as you said, devoted their whole life to it. I remember when I first started here, he was already a detective. He actually helped with my background check and so forth.
Oh, wow.
But, it was always one that was willing to take you under his wing and show you how to do things. Again, he was a longtime detective. So whether it was, casework or evidence processing. And then when he retired as a detective, became our kind of lead in the evidence room as an evidence tech and worked there for, another 23 years?
Yes,
or whatever,
23
until he
years,
passed away. I think it was encouraging to see that, there are times where you see people that they've kind of gotten tired of their job, and that never happened with him. He still loved it. He still loved coming in. He didn't need to be there, and he did have other interests and, a farm, and
fishing and
all these things, but he still made time for it, and he wanted to be there, be involved, be relevant, those kinds of things. So I think it's just an encouragement more than anything.
Well, you're very relevant, Jason Leverton. Again, I know I speak for the community that we are in awe of what you've done for us and continue to do. And again, we just spoke about that gentleman. What would you like people 20, 30 years from now say about Jason Leverton and when he was with the DeKalb Police Department?
Well, what I would always say when it came to as a supervisory role, I wanted to be known as being fair, because as a supervisor for a long time, for much of my career, there's times you have to dole some discipline out and reprimand people.
I want to see your supervisor.
But yes, at the end of the day, it was I wanted to be fair. And the work ethic to me is, even though it comes naturally to me, anyone who knows me knows I'm a work first kind of person. But to be known for that is we know he was always working for us. He always had our back. And I feel like the people that I work with always had my back, and then that's really what it's all about. So, and again, I don't look at it so much as remembering me individually as a person as it is the whole department, that we've grown so much, that we've improved so much, that we've never, as you mentioned, we never stopped training, we never stopped serving in the community. And to just be one small part of that, in this little segment of time, that's enough for me. That's fine. It doesn't have to be, any one outstanding thing or any, one great call or great case. It's a body of work that was done, and hopefully I've done my best. I feel like I have, and I'm proud of it. But you know what? The department doesn't miss a beat. It carries on, and there is very capable people that Keith Urke taking my spot, he will do great. I no issues whatsoever. That success is being able to walk away and the department doesn't miss a beat.
Oh, well put there. All right. Well, again, it's been an honor and a privilege. Go bowling. Go take pictures.
Yes.
Go take pictures of you bowling. But thank you so much for what you've done for our community.
Well, thank
We
you very
appreciate
much
that.
for having me. I appreciate it.
Jason Leverton has been our guest here on TD Ryan Unleashed podcast number 69.